Welcome to Specific Love. We're outside because we're about to build the biggest project yet. We're gonna put a deck on the back of our house. Now, for this video, we're gonna show you all the challenges we went through to build the deck frame. Here's a before shot, and here's an after. Let's get started. Now, if you're gonna attempt a project like this at your house, I strongly recommend to check your local area for your codes and permits needed to do this, because I can almost guarantee you they'll be a little bit different than mine. So just be safe, go get those figured out first. Now our first step is to remove these stairs, so that way we can get a ledger board up and get everything started. Now when you're removing a bunch of old wood, there's a good chance that screws might break or may not even come up like I'm having difficulties here. In those cases, you may have to pry the wood up. Be very careful if you're removing a structure that's already attached to your house, because you don't want to take any chance of it messing up the structure of the boards that are already on the house. So that's why I'm not going through here with a sledgehammer and breaking everything, because I don't want to hurt that part of the house. Now in the transition of building a deck, or even just removing all the material you need to get out of the way, sometimes this is a long drawn out process, especially on a sunny day that the sun, it can easily get a sunburn. So I've transitioned to a long sleeve old nasty dress shirt that you'll probably see me even turn up my collar occasionally just to protect myself from the sun. You can do sunscreen or whatever you would like, stuff that you'd probably do at the beach to protect you from getting a sunburn. So just be prepared with that. Now I'm dealing with an old house. This is where the steps were, and I'm finding a bunch of these old, somewhat rusty screws that are deeply embedded into this wood and are very, very challenging to get out. That is, here's a good tip. If you ever get one of these right here, you'll probably have to pry on it a little bit, like so, because you want to get a little bit of area around it so you can get to it. Now, this of course is going to damage the wood a little bit, but I'm planning on replacing this, but I don't want to damage the wood behind it, so I'm not going to just pry it off. So we're going to try and get it to the part where we can easily then transition over to some pliers. These are the end cutters here, and if we can do this just right, we'll now be able to pull this nail a little bit out now. Now take your hammer, and you can get in here and try and remove this nail a little bit easier. And there we go, one of those long nails. Now that we have the side of the house all cleaned up, I added a waterproof adhesive flashing. This right here is to just protect the band of the house so the wood does not get wet. We're gonna put the ledger over this, and we'll actually have another drip edge that goes on top of the ledger so that it actually will pull the water away. So there's very little chance water will ever even see this, but I just wanted to protect it to be safe. Now we finally have the ledger installed, and I want to tell you a few tips I've learned in the process of putting this up. First off, you need 2 people to install this minimum, because you need to make sure this is nice and level when you're putting it up, so there's very little chance your deck will be way off or water's going to run in the wrong direction. And once I had it level, I added just a few small screws all the way through. That way it'll hold it in position while we get it ready for the bolts. But before we add the bolts, we need to go through and mark exactly where all the joists will be. That way there's 0 chance of them being accidentally under them. And then according to code, and just to be safe, we added the appropriate number of bolts. These are through bolts, they go all the way through, and I've had washers on each side to make sure everything's nice and strong. And then on top of the ledger, we've added flashing so that as water gets back in here, it won't go back behind the wood, it'll actually then come off the front. I've added an additional piece out here just for additional protection, and just so that as the water comes off, it'll be more likely to run off onto the ground. Now, as you do this, you need to make sure that your flashing is up under your insulation and your vinyl siding or whatever you have on your house, so that the water will continue to go to the outside and there's 0 chance of going behind it. Now that we have the ledger in place, we can now measure out exactly where we want to go and dig for the footings. Now we've dug 4 holes in the ground for the footings. Now I didn't show you the footage of actually digging the holes. If you really want to see that, I'm sure you can find another video digging holes. But anyway, we've placed 2-foot cylinders in each of these holes. We've packed dirt around them to keep them nice and level and sturdy, and now we're about to put concrete inside. Now to mix all of our concrete, we're actually using the steel mixer. This is an awesome little unit, allows you to mix concrete in about a minute. Yeah, a 50-pound bag in about a minute, no electricity, and all it takes is gravity and you moving it back and forth. My wife and I made a cute little video showing exactly how this works and how easy it is to put together. I'll put a link to that in the description, so make sure you check that out. Now we put concrete in here, and I've placed one of these 10-inch concrete anchors down into the concrete. Now you probably don't have to do this, but we added some strings on the side just to keep it from sinking into the concrete till it's cured enough to hold it up. In any case, this sticks about 1 inch above the concrete, so we can then put the bracket that fits on top of it that holds the actual post, and we can screw it down. Now after a few days of letting the concrete cure, we've positioned these base plates into position. These will be holding, in my case, the 6x6s I'm going to be using for the posts. And the reason why is that these plates allow it to raise the wood off of the concrete so it stays a lot drier and won't have this constant water intake from the concrete or from the ground. We also carefully used a string to align everything up to make sure all 4 posts will be in a direct alignment with each other. We then installed these outside concealed joist hangers on the ledger. These are hanging the outside pieces, and the reason why they're concealed because you're right on the edge, and that way you can put all your nails on the inside. I have a double here because I'm going to be running 2 joists, and that'll be the next step. Now before I took the wood around, I've actually doubled them up here. And I'm using some number 10 3-inch long screws to make sure they're nice and secure. These are definitely for exterior use. And I made sure this is the top, that the crown here, in other words, the highest part of the wood is actually pointed towards the top. Next step was putting out the double joist on both sides, attaching to that joist hanger we currently have on the ledger. And I've hooked up a temporary leg here just from the stairs that we knocked down earlier. And that allowed me to string a string across here and measure exactly the height I needed for this post. Now right now it looks really short, but just remember, we're gonna have the 3-ply boards going across, which will fill that and allow all the joists to sit on top. Now I finally have the post in place, and this is starting to actually take some shape. Now this beam is currently just resting on the top of it. I have to go back and put the brackets and some nails in the bottom. These middle posts I had to cut a few times to get them to the exact, almost perfectly flush with everything. So if you happen to build a deck, be prepared for that. On the top of this beam here, I've added some more of that adhesive flashing right over the top edge to keep water from going down in between the beams and causing it to rot prematurely. When you're putting your brackets in, there's a couple things to remember. If you're gonna use nails, I strongly suggest getting a palm nailer because it goes super fast. Watch. Done. Otherwise, you're gonna be banging for a good minute just to get that in. Or, in some cases, you can use structural screws. Not all screws are equal, so make sure you have structural screws. There's a few companies that make them that can screw in and be just as strong as the nails on shear strength. But I also like them because it keeps it from pulling out. Now, as I'm attaching these joists to the ledger, I want to make sure that the distance from the very end joist that I've added already is the same distance on both ends. So I'm taking a measurement right at the house and way out here on the end. Once I know everything is exactly the same, then I can go back and add these hurricane ties and secure everything in place. Now in the process of building this deck, I've discovered 2 Yellowjacket nests. And in this area, they are quite aggressive. Look right over here, you might be able to see the black line going down because I've sprayed several times trying to get down into their hole and to kill them. Unfortunately, it has not worked, and so I'm gonna take some other actions. And there you have it, a full-out bee suit because I'm not taking any chances of getting stung a bunch of times. So, let's go do this. When I first got out, I started trying to dig away some of that dirt, and I realized I needed to pull up one of these pieces of wood. In the process of pulling it up, the Yellowjackets started just to swarm, and I wanted to back up and give them a moment to settle down before I took everything apart. Here's part of their nest. It's actually attached to the bottom of this board. So yeah, well, hopefully I got them all out. And in case you were wondering, wearing that suit in the middle of summer is very hot. Whew. Wow, can't hardly see. Oh man. But definitely worth not getting stung. Now that we have all the joists in place, if you were to look along the edge here, they would be waving back and forth. Some are a little bit longer than others, and that's just lumber when you get it from the store. So I've taken a chalk line and I've drawn a straight line, making sure everything's still nice and square. And then we're gonna take a speed square and we're gonna make a straight line going down exactly what I need to cut off on each joist, and do that with a circular saw. Now when you're about to put up the rim joist on the end of your deck here, a lot of times if you have two people, it's pretty simple. One person can hold one end, the other can hold the other while you're attaching it together. But if you're doing it with one person like I am myself here, you need a little assistant here. This is just a 2x4 that I've put on the bottom of this joist with a couple screws. And I put a little end cap so I can slide the end joist, rim joist, right here on the end, and there's no chance of it falling out, and there's little chance of it actually sliding out. That way I can hold it in position, lock in that one, come over here, and then lock in this one. Now that I have the rim joists finally in place, I need to go back and add some blocking in between all of the standard joists so they're a lot stronger and there's very little chance of them moving. All right, there we go. I just installed some what they call blocking in between each of the joists. This is just one of the additional 16-foot boards that I had, and I have cut it to fit right in between each of the joists here, and I've secured it with 4 screws, 2 on each side, so a total of 8 total screws going in. Depending on your area, you might be able to use screws. Sometimes you're required to use nails. You should check your codes on that just to be sure. Now this blocking is set up so that it gives strength to the entire deck, but especially just from like side to side movement with the joists. That way it keeps everything nice and strong, nice and square, and you don't have to worry about anything moving around. For example, these are very sturdy now. And there you have it. The frame of our deck is pretty much complete. I actually consulted a professional in the process of building this, and some of the things I'm doing are actually even overkill, especially for the code in our area. Now I'm sure the code in your area, wherever you live, could be a little different, so make sure you check with all your codes and permits so that you're not under and have to redo any of it. I'd rather, of course, have safety over convenience anytime. Now, with that said, we still have a lot to go on this deck. I have a couple more videos coming out, so keep a lookout for those. Otherwise, I hope you enjoyed this video. So get out in your shop and have fun building.